Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman, here as always with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
Well, Tony, we are in that nice sweet spot between the end of the regular season and the bowl season. And we've got to talk to Marvin Harrison this week, but there's not a whole lot going on. But the transfer portal is keeping everyone a little busy. So I was like, all right, this is a nice show, a nice week where we can just kind of relax, just do a couple shows and that's it. And then you had the audacity to ask the listeners for some questions. And now we're maybe going to have to do 2 more shows this week. So nice work, Tony. Way to go.
The audacity, the unmitigated gall, that's me, that trying to provide the listeners with something to listen to and the viewers something to view, Tom. I apologize for nothing. I don't apologize for working harder than anybody else. I don't apologize. I will never apologize for that. This is the grind life. This is what I do. This is how I operate. Also, Tom, I would like you to know that I have committed to Colorado.
Well, that's there are many reasons to do that, and great job. Congratulations. Enjoy the mountain air. Believe me, if I could afford to live in Boulder, I would think seriously about living in Boulder. So with your new NIL winnings, I'm sure you will have a lovely time in Boulder. It always looks fantastic on TV, and I'm sure it's a lovely place to play. Just don't get run over by the buffalo. All right. So let's start with one from @Marcus Hartman. I don't know who that is. Never heard of him. Have you guys noticed the transfer portal and NIL have had an impact on college football? Tony, this feels like one where we could just say big if true and leave it at that, but you probably have something more to say than that.
Yeah, and for those who don't know, Marcus is a curmudgeon. I would tell him that to his face, and probably have. But this is implying that there have only been positive outcomes from NIL and the transfer portal, and that those touting the benefits of those have never considered the negative aspects of what could happen and the unintended consequences. And I think my biggest thing in all of this is that these have not necessarily been like voluntary movements. Let's not forget NIL was brought by state laws, and then the NCAA had to operate and change their ways. So, and the transfer portal, the movement there is basically trying to stave off lawsuits and things like that. So this has basically been a dragging of the feet, and now everything is coming to a head all at once because of all of the feet dragging. And so this isn't change for change's sake. Some of this is change to avoid lawsuits and avoid congressional action, but also this is being done eventually with the need for congressional action because of all of the various people wanting something from this.
Yeah, I think if this was the end state of NIL and this is the permanent solution, I think I would be much, much more worried about this. This feels like the weird, in-between transition, the natural selection is at work. And I just heard Aaron Portzline from The Athletic use this analogy on a podcast about the Blue Jackets. And anytime, Tony, you can compare somebody to the Blue Jackets, it's always the highest of compliments. But he said, it's like the weird natural selection thing where, the animal's not quite through the process and it's got one leg and one flipper. And it's just kind of like, well, this isn't quite right. That's kind of where we are in college football and the transfer portal era and the NIL era. If this was the final answer, that answer would be very bad. This is going to get resolved one way or the other, and it's either going to get resolved through congressional action or it's going to get resolved through, NCAA or whatever replaces the NCAA kind of legislative action. Some of that was proposed by Charlie Baker, the NCAA president, earlier in the week. Or it's going to get resolved by the good old free market and people going, hey, we're throwing a lot of money at these quarterbacks. And, sometimes you get play that's, Joe Burrow at LSU. And sometimes you get Devin Leary at Kentucky. And it's like, that's not. And sometimes you get Malik Zaire at Florida. And, there is not a guarantee. And at some point, rich people do not generally get rich by just throwing money down the garbage disposal. So at some point, people will get tired of doing that if the results are not following, and the results are not always following. So the good old free market may sort of start to resolve some of this, but, they may get, the good old free market may get beaten to that punch by either the NCAA or some sort of congressional action of some sort as well.
Well, and the people who have been proponents of NIL and these moves, like whether it's Gene Smith or it's people on podcasts, people writing about it, the people ruining it are the millionaires and billionaires. The people who are negatively impacting things are the ones who are throwing a bunch of money and creating this free market system that has enraged a handful of people. And like you said, Tom, eventually that comes back to it levels, the water finds its level, or else the $75 million coach gets fired, as we saw with Texas A&M, when those boosters don't like the return on their investments. And you can only fire so many coaches before you start thinking, well, maybe we are spending our money in the wrong places. And then the Charlie Baker thing, I think, is very interesting in terms of allowing the schools to do this and getting the collectives out of the situation and putting the control back into the schools. We've talked about this on a whole separate show, and you can go listen to that a few days back or a few episodes back. But this is at least some proactivity by the NCAA, which we have not seen since, Tom, I don't even know when.
I have to tell you that in all the years we've been podcasting, I don't think I've ever been so owned as me saying, eventually rich people stop doing stupid things and stop throwing their money down the garbage disposal. And then you to throw Jimbo Fisher into my face. Sir, I may, what's the old drill line? Like turn into a corn cob, like whatever it is, that's what I'm about to do. That is, I have been rebuked. I have learned my lesson.
Mm-hmm.
People always bet on stupidity, Tony. That is perhaps the single greatest lesson any of us can take from any of gestures vaguely towards lots of stuff. Next one from @DonJohn1902. Ohio State has had a crazy run with Heisman finalists in recent memory. Who do you think would be one next year? Now, you asked Marvin Harrison about that earlier in the week. I think the answer to this is it depends, because who's Ohio State's starting quarterback next year? Whoever that is, I think is a pretty good option. Other than that, it's generally an offensive skill position player. Generally, it is, outside of your random Chase Youngs. I don't know that there's a Chase Young on this team that I would project to be in that spot. So, and, generally it takes a defensive player doing some remarkable stuff on special teams, which seems somewhat unlikely based on recent years. So I think you've got to bet on an offensive skill player, which is either Ohio State's starting quarterback, which will be so hopefully you agree with that name that I just threw out there. Does Travion Henderson come back? If Travion Henderson comes back, sure, he's a great answer here. Does Emeka Egbuka come back? If Emeka Egbuka comes back, sure, I could maybe see that being an answer here. But it feels like it's going to be someone from the offensive skill position room. Does Carnell Tate take that next step? Or whoever, it's someone from that offensive skill group, and you can kind of just throw a dart and take a pick.
Yeah, and that's basically what Marvin Harrison's answer was when I asked him, if it's not you, then who next year? And he said all the same things. Travion Henderson was one of the Heisman, like top 5 Heisman favorites in 2022 before the season, based on his freshman year. And if he did come back, I would see him being one of those top 5, top 10 favorites this year as well. But I don't know that you can expect him to play the 13 games that most Heisman candidates are playing, most Heisman finalists are playing. So the correct answer is the quarterback. And Tom, I agree with your assessment of who that quarterback would be. And if you missed that, you can just rewind it, and maybe the transcript will pick it up. The live transcript on what Tom said will pick that up. Sometimes that tells you even more than the actual video. So if we were to say which quarterback that is going to be, I'm not even going to ask you to do that, because it would be a complete guess at this point. And we know we don't like to be held to our guesses. We only like to be held to our bold predictions. And I did not ask for anybody's bold prediction.
There you go. If there's one thing this show is good for, it's putting out bold predictions. Next one from @Ol_Pete 1926. Do you think Sherrone Moore's not winning a Broyles award is related to the scandal.
Now, Tom, why exactly should Sherrone Moore be a Broyles winner? He is the offensive coordinator of the number 14 scoring offense, the number 60 rushing offense, the number 70 yard per carry offense, the number 75 passing yards per game offense. The only thing he is leading the nation in is assistant coach suspensions and assistant coach head coaching games. Like, he didn't even assistant coach in as many games as all of the other assistant coaches. So I don't, and I was going to put this out on Twitter, but I have finally slowed down on my mentions from Michigan fans, so I don't need to restart this. But what has he done to even be a finalist?
I'm so excited to clip this, tag you in it, and tweet it from the Buckeye Huddle account. It's going to be great. I cannot wait for it. Again, at Tony Gerdeman, that's at TonyGerdeman on Twitter.com. Yeah, I think the statistical piece, yeah, but, since when has award voting been super logical? I think is, that is what makes me think that it's maybe not solely based on that. I think it's sort of getting lost in, everyone remembers, the emotional thing, the scene on the field, the interview after the Penn State game, and all the stuff they've overcome. Sherrone Moore served a school-imposed one-game suspension at the beginning of the year for stuff completely unrelated to all the stuff that led him to coaching at the end of the year. So, yeah, I don't know that Sherrone Moore has won himself a ton of goodwill within the coaching community. That was, Michigan, again, self-imposing that. This is not Tony Petitti being mean and, there's, someone on the message board said there's a great legal argument that we're going to control C and control V. This was a whole separate thing earlier in the year. So, yeah, I think you're probably looking at why, in addition to all the stuff you said, I think the, suspension at the beginning of the season is a decent chunk of it as well. All right, so next one from at called out for YH. How do you think Day's lack of experience as a head coach affects his big game prep / mindset? And this is an interesting one because I don't know how much is his lack of experience as a head coach, because he's been a head coach now for a while. Mm-hmm. I think you could look at Kirk Ferentz and say, I don't know that there's a direct correlation between big game prep and mindset and coaching experience necessarily. I think what might impact some of that stuff in terms of mindset and prep and all that kind of stuff is he might just be wearing too many hats right now, where I go back to the end of the Notre Dame game, which worked out great. Ohio State won that game. So great, fantastic. End of the Notre Dame game, end of the Michigan game, you're kind of in a similar spot. And I do want to ask him about this at some point, where they're down with a couple minutes left in the game, 3-4 minutes left in the game. The other team has the ball. Ohio State's defense has to manage the clock. Ohio State's defense has to get off the field. The offense has to get the ball back. He has to he's also the primary play caller. So he's got to figure out, okay, I got to manage my timeouts here. I got to manage the clock. I've also got to figure out, okay, how much time approximately am I going to have left, which is going to impact what kind of plays I'm going to call. How much time am I going to have? Where's the ball going to be? How many timeouts am I going to have left? All that kind of stuff. That's a lot of stuff to juggle, because there are plenty of coaches that will screw up clock management with nothing else on their plate. I'm just a CEO coach, and you'll get guys screwing up timeouts and clock management and that kind of stuff. I think a lot of the issues that he's had may just be a little bit, some of it's probably just bad luck, because, the difference between the Notre Dame game and the Michigan game was in one game, the defender got his hands on a pass and didn't catch it. And in the other one, the defender got his hands on the pass and did catch it. And that's it. And the one where they got their hands on the pass and caught it, the left tackle stepped on the left guard's foot. The left guard got pushed back as a result into the quarterback, got hit, and that impacted the play. There is a little bit of very fine margin kind of bad outcome stuff here. But I do also think there's some process stuff here where you're asking yourself to do a lot all at once. and you're juggling a bunch of different responsibilities that are only sort of vaguely related, and which the thought process, trying to process all that stuff at the same time, it's just a lot. And I think you're setting yourself up for issues trying to do all of that stuff at once. And it felt like this time last year, Ryan Day sort of recognized that and was, okay, I'm willing to give up play calling. And then here we are 12 months later and Ryan Day is still play calling. So, that's going to be something that I think needs to get revisited. And if Brian Hartline is not the answer there, because you don't feel like he's ready, then maybe you bring in another Kevin Wilson type veteran play caller, great offensive mind, add to the staff to be that guy who helps out with that. It feels like the status quo is probably not sustainable.
Tom, are you suggesting removing Parker Fleming and adding another assistant coach to the offensive side of the ball? Because, sir, if you are, that is an outrage.
I don't remember saying those exact words in that exact order, but I don't know. I would have to go back and check the transcript, which I've heard is more accurate than just listening.
Yes, especially because I can't control the transcript. I'm completely with you. It's not a lack of experience, because he should be learning from these mistakes that have been made. And now this is year 5, without even counting the 2018 season. I'm with you. You mentioned the CEO guy even having trouble managing stuff, and I immediately thought back to Les Miles having a pass thrown and land out of bounds with like 1 second left to give them an opportunity to continue to win a game. Those guys, the clock thing is, it's a lot, and I know, well, that's all I've ever known, so I'm used to it. That you have that from a lot of these guys. But we should have like Eli Drinkwitz's quotes up here about giving up play calling and how much more that allowed him to tune into the motivation aspect of the team and the just keeping guys on schedule, things like that. Because for him, it was something that really, really helped him. And I know play calling is part of basically Ryan Day's identity at this point, and he's a very, very, very good play caller, and there are guys running open, and there are successful plays weekly for the Buckeyes, but at the expense of better game management, and sometimes it's the game management that costs you. And when he talked last year about giving up play calling or beginning that process, so much of this was also about the off-field stuff. It wasn't even game management. It was, well, there's just a lot going on. I need to be in tune with my players better. The transfer portal, I need to know where guys stand. Like, just the day-to-day things that made him think, giving up play calling would be something that would help him get back to just having more time to do that. And that may happen. I still think Brian Hartline should be calling plays in a bowl game, so that they can begin that process and see how well he does and get him accustomed to doing that. The spring game isn't good enough. A few practices in the spring isn't good enough. If you want to know if he can call plays and if you're okay with it and how that process is, use it this month and see how it goes. And if it doesn't go well, then you know what else you have to work on. I don't expect them to bring somebody else in, but what you're doing now isn't, you could be doing it better. And you're right. It's just so much with the game management and the just talking about, okay, what are we going to do on this drive while you're waiting for your defense to get that final stop, while also, I need to be looking at the clock and calling timeouts. There's 15 different things going on, and you could allow other people to do 6 or 7 of those things. You don't have to do them all.
Yeah, exactly. And it does feel like there's, at some point, all of the very close losses, it stops being just purely a coincidence and bad luck, because so many of their games have gone right down to the end, and they've won a few of them. I mean, obviously very, very notably the Notre Dame game this year, but it feels like they have been, without going back and counting, sub 500 in kind of last minute type games over Ryan Day's tenure. And that just is kind of an indication. At some point that stops being a coincidence, and there's something else that needs to be addressed or changed there. That's my guess as to one of the things that might make a difference. But it's possible they could make whatever changes and still lose a game like that next year. That's also sort of the nature of college football. So next one from @Mike_Smith08. Perception versus reality. What is the actual state of the program with all the portal entries, recruiting flips, and lack of change in the known issues on this team? Special teams coach, for example. So I think a lot of the portal stuff that you've seen, the flood of guys going into the portal on the first day, Julian Fleming and Kyle McCord are kind of the exception. Virtually everyone else there was someone who had not played, was not on the verge of being a real answer for this team, in the next year or two, and seemed like they were going for an opportunity to find, a better path to the playing field. That's sort of what the portal's designed to do. I don't think that's a big issue. Losing your starting quarterback is, it's a very unusual look for a program at Ohio State's position in the sport. Notre Dame lost their starting quarterback to the portal, or one of their starting quarterbacks to the portal a year ago. So it's not like this is completely unheard of, but that's, I think I look at that as maybe a little bit of a one-off situation right now. And, we have gone into some of the reasoning behind that. And you don't want to be in the business of guaranteeing someone a starting job if you're not convinced they're good enough to be the starting quarterback. That sets you up for, many, many more cultural issues, locker room issues than the other way around. So I don't know that in some of the flips that they've had in recruiting, they've lost a guy or two in December. It feels like each of the last few years. I think that feels real notable because it's happened to Ohio State, and people who are watching this are generally following Ohio State more closely than others. Ohio State is not the only team that's happening to. That is sort of one of the realities of the sport right now, is the NIL and all that has really changed some of the recruiting and some of what can be offered and all that kind of stuff. And as I said earlier, I think we're not in the final form of NIL, but Ohio State has kind of gotten bitten a couple times with, the last minute swoop in and, Mr. Steal Yo Girl kind of thing. And that's not totally unique to Ohio State either. That may just sort of be one of those realities of college football world right now.
Yeah, looking at in terms of the decommits, and there's a lot to process in this question, but there were 2 decommits past November last year. There was one in the 2022 class in Terrence Brooks that was past November. Looking at the 2021 class, you lost 2 guys there, but you lost them in the summer. 2020, obviously a COVID class, you lost Clark Phillips and late. So these, and as Tom said, the NIL aspect of this changes everything. And, like Jordan Seaton committing to Colorado, why can't Justin Fry close the deal? And somebody, Walter Nolan is visiting, I think, Oregon, and I tweeted that out. And somebody responded with, all right, Larry Johnson, close the deal. It's like coaching, the position coaches at this point almost have nothing to do with some of these guys. It's all about the NIL. And then also, can you develop me? Yes, we have coaches here that can do that. Well, fantastic, because that was the second part of my question. The first part of my question was, how big was the bag? And so the culture or what's going on, or are things as bad as they seem? No. The portal entries, we can go through these guys one at a time, and you tell me which of these guys is a definitive starter, because I don't, Kyle McCord wasn't guaranteed the starting job. Chip Trainum has been a 4-yard, 5-yard to carry guy at Ohio State. Obviously wants to play more, not guaranteed a starting spot. Evan Pryor, as we know. Julian Fleming wants the ball. He's had 3 years to get the ball and hasn't necessarily gotten what he, to where he is a 1A guy. So maybe go somewhere and be that guy, because at this point, you can't expect, he shouldn't expect that I'll come back from my senior year and I'll be the guy at Ohio State, because Ohio State has shown him that you're probably not going to be that guy. Joe Royer, obviously, he's been passed over. a lot of these guys have been passed over by younger guys, which is usually the main ingredient. Jacob James, Victor Cutler. Victor Cutler comes in to play center and loses out the job to a redshirt freshman. Same for Jacob James. Was a fourth-year guy now. Missed the spring, was going to be in the mix at center, got passed over by a redshirt freshman. Omari Abor, just for whatever reason, it didn't work out. He was always one of the guys in that class that if you asked all of the recruiting beat and the people on the Ohio State beat, he's going to be one of the top guys that they would expect to hit the portal just because of, how far away he was from home and how little he played. Reed Carrico, passed up by younger guys. Jair Brown, passed up by younger guys. Ryan Turner, same thing. Cam Martinez, passed up by younger guys, better guys, not playing very well. Kai Stokes gets passed up by Malik Hartford, younger guy. Parker Lewis loses his job to a walk-on. You're seeing guys make business decisions. It's not people scurrying off of a sinking ship or anything like that. It's just people looking for playing time. And then the last part of this, the special teams, Parker Fleming, and I asked this on the board, how often do you see a coach replaced before the season is over? And, you don't really see that. Now, how difficult is it to say, Parker, you're no longer one of the 10 assistant coaches. We need James Laurinaitis to be wearing that tag so that he can go out and recruit for the next 2 weeks before signing day is here. I don't know how easy that is. But if that would be the only type of coaching decision that I think you can even expect to see. And I don't even know if you can expect to see that before the season is over, because again, the season is still going on. And at this point, it would be a surprise if they made a move. I'm not saying it shouldn't be done. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying at this point, if you're still a coach on December 8th, December 9th, you're probably going to be the coach on December 29th as well.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think you need to kind of reserve judgment on some of this stuff until you get into the off season and all that kind of stuff. I have thought for a while that it's very odd that you have someone who is as dynamic as James Laurinaitis, who is, you hear about how impactful he is in terms of, recruits and all that kind of stuff. In the limited role he's allowed to have right now, it seems like that would be something you would want to increase his role. And, maybe there is some technical reason that I'm not aware of that you couldn't have done that at some point before the season, middle of the season, end of the season, whatever. It feels like that was such a logical move that there must be something I'm missing that I'm not aware of. But I think that's something that's certainly I would certainly expect him to be one of the 10 full-time assistants next year. And then, moves beyond that, we'll see what they end up deciding to do. I think you got lots of possible moves you could make, but that's not, as you said, you're not making wholesale big changes to your staff in the 3 weeks between the end of the regular season and a bowl game. That's not, that's not something that's really ever done. We'll see what happens in January. We'll see what, that's generally when the decisions get made. Even when, Ryan Day was coming in and we were at the Rose Bowl for, the Washington Rose Bowl in the 2018 season. And, we knew that Ryan Day was coming in to replace Urban Meyer. All those coaches were there. There were lots of coaches that were there that day that were not on the staff 3 days later, but they were all there in that sort of transitional period, because you're not going to bring in someone brand new from the outside to help with a game prep that's 3 weeks out. Cause that's, there's too much to learn. You don't know the system. You don't know the players, that's not realistic. And there are only so many internal hires you're going to make. So I don't think people are necessarily thinking they need to hire more young internal guys and promote them. So there's only so much you're going to be able to do during the, end of the regular season to bowl kind of period anyway.
Yeah, and I think one piece of good news for the Buckeyes, it looks like Manny Diaz being named the Duke head coach will bring Jim Knowles back. I wouldn't expect to see him leave for any reason. He was year 2 of a 3-year contract, so I would expect him to be back. That will continue the continuity for the Ohio State defense. even losing a bunch of players and having him back, and having that defense back for a third year should help, because there could be a step back defensively just because of the personnel that they may lose. So having the coach and the system and players experienced in that system may mitigate some of the issues. So I would just like to say, if you have not liked this video yet, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like it. I should have mentioned that earlier. That's Tom's fault. So please do that. If you have not yet subscribed to the YouTube channel, please do that as well. And of course, if you're listening on a podcast, please go ahead and give us a 5-star rating and review if your platform allows for that. Tom, do you have anything else before we get out of here?
I do not. I just glad we were able to go just long enough to get the train in the background. That's our signal that we have now completed a legal episode of the Buckeye Weekly Podcast.
Yes. And so with that, well, thank you all for tuning in, and we will talk to you guys later.